You're listening to Faith Football Fans, where we talk about your Atlanta Falcons all year long with Toby D.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Toby D, and you've tuned in to my Christian audio podcast, Faith Football Fans. Now I want to jump right into it because we all know what time of year it is. Yes, if you said it, it is NFL Combine season. Now, they're doing it a little bit later this year. It's starting officially on March 3rd. Usually, it's like right in getting into the late 20s of February. And it'll finish usually in February at the end. But this time, they're doing it starting officially March 3rd through the 6th. And these 15 guys that I'm about to talk about are going to be heavily involved in it, especially on Sunday. Now, I've been using this formula since 2012 that has helped me tremendously, that I was shown by a guy named Pat Curran, and I'm sure many of you have heard of him. He has many years of football knowledge, especially on an NFL level. And there's two formulas that he showed me on what to look for on a player, and that is number one, getting his explosion number. Now, what am I looking for in that explosion number? A player with a 70 or better. And what that means to me is that player has the physicality to be able to handle the offensive person in front of him and get to the quarterback. And so that's one of the things I'm looking for, that explosiveness to be able to make plays, especially when we're looking at a player 10-yard split, which is very important from a defensive side of the ball. Even more important than running the whole 40, that 10-yard split is important. And being able to get that explosion number to go with that 10-yard split is great in being able to post arguments or to back up why you believe in a certain player coming out of college in this draft. And that explosion number is consisting of three things. It is the bench press, the vertical jump, and the broad jump. And you take those three and you add them up, and if you get a score of a 70 or better, then you are in good shape, at least on paper, at seeing the explosion of that potential prospect that your team may be drafting in the NFL draft. Now, the other number that I use, which, by the way, that I'm going to talk about more right now because I have access to those numbers, because I don't have the explosion numbers yet because the combine has not yet taken place. And usually I have to wait till the pro day to get certain people because they're injured, so they can't participate in everything in the combine, or if at all anything. But this number is called the production ratio. Now, what does that mean? Basically, I will be looking for players with a 1.0 grade or better. And what that indicates to me when those players have that 1.0 or better grade is that they live in the backfield. In other words, all you do is see them making plays and disrupting plays, whether it's a run play or whether it's a pass play. They're in the backfield all day, every day that they play. And that's what you're looking for. But I found something interesting when I used the production formula this season. And basically what you do in the production formula, if you should decide to use it, is you take the total amount of career sacks of that player and you add it with the total amount of career tackles for loss of that player, and you divide it by the amount of games that that player has played throughout his career. And if you get that 1.0 or better, then on paper, it's looking mighty good. And what I realized was, since the Falcons, I'm sure, are in the running for looking for pass rushers to help out Mr. Vic Beasley and Grady Jarrett and other guys that we're trying to keep on our team, Adrian Claiborne, and hopefully we can re-sign Courtney Upshaw, who has really surprised me and impressed me this year with his versatility of moving out of Sam backer into a defensive end and or defensive tackle role. And we want to add guys to that front. Well, what I found this year that's unlike other years that I've been using this formula, and I've been using it, I say, since about 2012. There were more guys than I have seen that had a 1.0 or better grade. And guys, to me, that raised my eyebrows, because what that tells me is that at least on paper, I don't think we've had a class from a defensive pass rushing side of things like this since I've been watching the draft. And hey, today is my birthday. I just turned 40, so I've been watching it for quite some time. And even Mike Mayock attests to that same thing, that he hasn't seen a class like this in a long time. And so what I did was I used that formula production ratio and I ranked them accordingly. Now, my ranking is going to more than likely change once I get the results of the explosion number, depending on how many of those 15 guys participate. I'm hoping all of them this time in the NFL Combine, who is healthy enough to be able to do so, or not waiting until their pro day because they feel like certain things are a little slower on the track at the NFL Combine and they will get better results at their pro day, which sometimes, like I said, I end up having to wait at least to get the explosion part. But I ranked them by the production number, and here's my ranking. Now, many of you are not going to agree with how I rank it. This is just from my fan point of view and how I see it, and the players that based on that production ratio I like. So let me start without further ado. I think most of you already know the first two guys that I'm going to already mention without me saying anything. And yes, if you said Myles Garrett and Derek Barnett, you hit the nail on the head, because both of these guys, as you can guess, have grades over a 1.0. When you take their sack numbers and plus their tackles for loss and divide it by the number of games they played, it is actually quite impressive. They're actually, Myles Garrett is at a 2.25. and Derek Barnett is at a 2.17. So those are the two highest on my list right now. The third guy you probably would not even guess, but he's from a small school. And yes, as a matter of fact, you've seen him in the Senior Bowl if you watched it. And his name is Mr. Derek Rivers. Now, this is a guy that has versatility. And I'm not going to get into too much detail because I haven't watched a lot of film just yet. Draft Breakdown is a great site to use if you have not been using it and you just been looking through YouTube. They have a lot of players that you can look at, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and be able to get a good gauge of what you're looking at as the player's potential going into the draft. But Mr. Derek Rivers, man, this is a guy that can play 3-4 and he can put his hands down in the dirt. He just so happens to be the third guy with the third highest explosion number of a 1.92. Now, there are some guys that I'm going to talk about a little bit more that really catch my eye that I would love for the Falcons to draft, at least earlier on until I see what that explosion number is like. But based on some of the things I've seen on Draft Breakdown, I don't think that's going to pretty much deter what I feel based on that explosion number. Now, I'm hoping, even though I said a 70 or better, if they don't go any lower than a 65, I'm feeling real good. But if they got an outrageous production number, that may balance things out. Who knows? But like I said, my three so far that I mentioned, Myles Garrett, Derek Barnett, and Derek Rivers. Now, the fourth person with the fourth highest production ratio that I have on my list right now currently is Mr. DeMarcus Walker from Florida State. And now he's projected as a second-round guy who could very well be there for the Falcons. Now, if he has a good combine, he may move on up in that first round. It's a lot of these guys that I have, these 15 guys, that can really make a name for themselves between his combine and the pro days. But he has a good production ratio as well. Number 5, Mr. Hunter Demick. Now, some of these guys, I apologize, I'm going to butcher the mess out of their names, but you guys know where I'm going at. But he's the 5th guy on my list right now. Now, some of you may be saying, why have I not mentioned Solomon Thomas? Well, because based on his production ratio, he's not in my top 5. So, with that being said, number 6, from Florida Atlantic, Mr. Trey Hendrickson. Now, he's projected a 4th, 5th round. Now, once again, I'm sure some of you probably saying this dude has not mentioned Solomon Thomas from Stafford yet. And Solomon Thomas is clearly better than this guy because he's projected as a first-round pick. Well, like I said before, his production ratio was not as high as the guys that I currently have in front of him right now. And I'm ranking it based on what I've totaled up based on sacks, tackles for loss, and divided it by the amount of games played. And so far, he's not in my top 6. Now, number 7, with that being said, and here's a guy that I'm probably going to come back and talk about a little bit more because he and one other guy are the most intriguing to me out of all 15 of these guys. And this is a guy from another small town school. Now, you have to be careful with small town guys because of the competition that they played. But sometimes good things do happen and translate well for those guys in the NFL. And this is a guy that I think things will translate very well for him. And if he has a killer combine, he's going to go up pretty high. And he's projected as a 4th rounder. Now, I hope I don't butcher his name too bad. I'm going to try to announce it the way Mike Mayock said it. Tanar Passion. This is a guy that I really, really like. He's the 7th guy on my list, and I put a star by his. And the reason why is because what we're looking for, like I said, the objective goal is to get a 1.0 or better. And sometimes you have to look at the amount of games that they started as well as the amount of games that they played, because you may get a better sample size of getting that 1.0 or better by the amount of games that they started. And the reason why I'm pointing that out is because, yes, he was the 7th guy with a high production ratio on my list. But when you total the amount of games that he started, right now he actually has a higher production ratio than, yes, Myles Garrett and Derek Barnett. Now, many of you are not going to agree with that. That's fine. Like I said, this is just coming from me. And the guys that I'm looking to see, based on these production ratios, that has me excited, at least from a paper point of view. Now, the 8th guy on my list, another guy that intrigues me, that I would love to become an Atlanta Falcon. From the Missouri Tigers, yes, defensive end, / of course, OLB, Mr. Charles Harris, who is projected a 1 or 2. Now, based on what type of combine he has, he can really increase his stock. And this is the guy that's 8th on my list with a high production ratio. And this guy really excited me when I saw his film. I can really see him as an Atlanta Falcon. Now, the next guy I'm about to mention, a guy that was in the Senior Bowl, who flashed a little bit in the Senior Bowl, and he's from Kansas State. My 9th guy on this list, based on production ratio, is D.E. Jordan Willis, who is projected as a third, fourth round guy who could really increase his draft stock. Guys, like I said, man, I had never seen this many guys from a pass rushing standpoint with versatility of 4-3, 3-4 type guys, where this many have high production ratios. The next guy is number 10. Finally, I get to Stafford's Solomon Thomas. Yes, he is projected as a first round. Now, I'm just going to tell you initially, just from the little film that I've watched from Draft Breakdown, I was not impressed. I'm just throwing that out there. And based on where he is right now, ranked now, if he has a killer explosion number, we'll see. I'm not really believing he's going to have a big-time explosion number based on what I saw. Now, that's just first glance. Like I said, I'm going to talk about these guys more as time goes along and the draft approaches on how I feel once I get these explosion numbers to go with their production numbers. But right now, he's number 10 on my list. I still will be looking at him because he's one of the 15 guys that I'm going to be looking at come Sunday. I believe that's when the defensive front four guys will be participating in the combine that day. Number 11 from Ohio, D.E. Terrell Basham had a very good production ratio as well. Number 12 from Illinois, D.E. DeJuan Smoot, projected a third, fourth round guy. All of these guys that's on my list right now, all the way up to 12, I can definitely see them. If they have a good combine, they are really going to move themselves up pretty good. Number 13 on my list, another guy that I like, and another guy that has been linked recently to the Atlanta Falcons from Auburn, Mr. Carl Lawson, who's projected a first, second round pick. Yes, he's not up there with my fourth, fifth round projected pick, Florida Atlantic Trey Hendrickson. Trey Hendrickson just so happens to have a higher production ratio than Carl Lawson does. But Carl Lawson is a guy, just from the little I've watched, and I'm going to dig into him as well as these other guys a lot more after this combine, has caught my attention, along with Charles Harris and Tanal Passion. My number 14 guy, one of the counterparts of Myles Garrett from Texas A&M as well, Deshaun Hall, who is projected a fourth, fifth round pick, who also has a nice, actually at a 1.0, based on the numbers that I got from him to come up with his production number, which is the reason why he is fourth team on my list. And the other guy, who also has somewhere in a 1.0, someone that was also linked to Atlanta Falcons, who people won't agree why I have him 15th. Many will think he's better than the guys that I have higher than him. Like I said, these rankings that I have are based on my production ratio that I have, based on the formula that I use. And that's why he's 15th from Michigan, D.E. Taco Charlton. I wasn't really initially as impressed with Taco Charlton. Now, based on just a little bit that I've looked at, I haven't really dug into him as much, but I wasn't really as impressed by first visual of him. But who knows? He could be a person. He's projected actually as a first round. And I know some people are going to want to slap me, but that's fine. I don't really care, because this is based on what formulas I use that has helped me to be able to look at players and scout players. Now, I don't just solely rely on these numbers. Like I just said, I do look at draft breakdown. Somebody's going to probably say, dude, you're just relying on numbers. No, I've said many a times on this video that I do look at draft breakdown. I don't just rely on the numbers, but the numbers do help me to post my arguments on why I believe in certain players, especially if those numbers are what I'm looking for them to be when I am looking at a certain player along with draft breakdown. And these are just the 15 guys just in the pass rush. I haven't even gotten to the defensive tackles. I haven't gotten to 4-3 OLBs or inside linebackers as of yet. So once this combine is over, hopefully I can get as much information I can as far as the explosive number side, and we can look into the defensive tackles. But from first glance, I haven't seen anything too impressive other than what I've seen out of Jonathan Allen. Now, I believe Kalen Bradley, he is a guy that's an interesting prospect, but he's not a guy really that you're going to be looking at that's going to get you a lot of sacks. He's got, to me, from first glance, great run-stuffing ability, as well as most of these guys somewhere in the middle. But usually, man, these formulas that I use, they are great for looking for gems that may potentially go undrafted, that teams can pick up that did not get drafted and will be looking to have a chip on their shoulders because they didn't get drafted, like a James Harrison, for example. And so you use these formulas because you can find guys potentially like that. But that is pretty much where I'm going right now. I'm definitely excited about this combine to see who the Falcons potentially will be looking at, kind of understanding what Dan Quinn looks at. That's why I'm going to talk about more of these players later after this combine is over with. And we'll continue to talk about these players until we get up to draft time at the end of April, where I will be able to break down even more about these players based on the information that I can gather. But that's pretty much it, man. I just wanted to throw that out there. You let me know what you think. I usually don't put this stuff out there like that because this is not really my area, but I figured I would do it just to share how I look at players and what I do when I'm looking at these players and the formulas that I use. Again, hey, comment, subscribe, like. Again, my name is Toby D. Faith Football Fans. Peace. I'm gone.
Thanks for tuning into Faith Football Fans with Toby D, your dependable Atlanta Falcons fan, talking about Atlanta Falcons football. Tune in next time.